I've had the base model M2 MacBook Air for about a month now, and it's been the driving force behind this business. Today, I'm going to reveal how it's performed, what matters, and more importantly, what doesn't matter. Oh, we've had some fun over the M2 MacBook Air over the last few weeks, haven't we? There's been multiple gates, there's been digital fistfights, there's been reviewers dropping out of the review game completely, there's been fury over smudges and then realizations that actually smudges don't matter, and finally, a lot of people have realized that Apple isn't doomed. But what more is there to say about this laptop? Well, after using mine every single day for the last month as the main workhorse behind this business, I'd like to offer you a sort of review that's not a review and just put a few things to bed. Because if you're still waiting to buy this and you're completely confused about which model to go for, there's a few things you need to know. Just a quick thank you to today's sponsor, which is 1Password, which is hands down the best password manager I have ever used. Although it is far more than that, you can basically store everything you hold dear in a super secure private vault. I use 1Password on every single device I have, which is quite a lot, so it goes straight onto my Macs, onto my Windows PC, but also onto my mobile devices. And the good news, the absolutely fantastic news, is that we can now get 1Password 8 on Android and also iOS. And 1Password 8 on these devices has had a massive design overhaul, which has been built for speed and which centers around this new home screen, which enables you to get to what you need very, very quickly. It's so useful. I use it for stuff like bank details, certain secure notes that I always need access to. You just stick them on your home screen and they are there immediately. They've also brought the full Watchtower experience to mobile, which gives you a security score that reveals the health of your most sensitive stuff online. That's been on Windows and Mac for a little while now, but to have the full Watchtower experience in the palm of your hand is very reassuring. There's loads more to explore in 1Password 8 for mobile, way too much for me to talk about in this sponsor read, but trust me, this is the biggest update to 1Password for mobile for a very long time, and boy, was it worth the wait. And the best news is that I've teamed up with 1Password so you can grab yourself a 25% discount off your first year. Just click the link in the description. Let's start by covering the only things that matter with the M2 MacBook Air. Firstly, the design. I think this is a beautiful laptop. I can't do it any justice in this video. It's very difficult. It looks nice when I shoot B-roll of it, but you have to get this thing in your hands to fully appreciate it. I absolutely love the mini MacBook Pro aesthetic they've chosen for this, and it's easily one of the most satisfying laptops I've ever owned to carry around. There's just something very, like I say, satisfying about slinging it on your arm or just walking around with it. It's so thin, so light, and just so convenient. It gets better the longer you own it and use it as well. Even the smudges, which I know you've been looking at on this midnight version, quickly turn into a non-event. I think the screen is a very pleasant upgrade over the M1 version as well. You get extra brightness, which has made a big difference this summer. We've had lots of bright sunlight coming through into the studio this year, and this makes a big difference with that. Perhaps the most important thing that matters about this laptop though is the fact that it feels pretty much identical to the M1 MacBook Air in terms of performance. And for me, that works. I'm just not sure how much more powerful this needs to be given its intended user base. And yes, this is the base model version. It's the 8GB of unified memory and 256GB SSD, which I'll come on to in a moment. It's perfectly quick enough for most people. It's not all roses though. I do wish there were more exciting colours to choose from. Like I say, I've got used to this midnight version, but I just can't work out why Apple didn't go down the iMac route with the M2 MacBook Air. Those really funky colours that we can get for the iMac, the 24-inch version. Why didn't they do that with this laptop? However, the most unavoidable aspect of this laptop is the price. It is very, very expensive, particularly today. But the biggest problem is that the M1 MacBook Air is still available for sale, and for as long as it is, for as long as that computer is on the shelf, it will remain a thorn in the side of the M2 MacBook Air. On to what doesn't matter about the M2 MacBook Air, and as mentioned earlier, I've grown to accept, if not actually quite like, the smudges on my midnight version. They do become rather endearing, and I know that makes me sound like an Apple apologist. I don't care. It's just something you have to lean into. If you spend money, and quite a lot of money, on a midnight version of the M2 MacBook Air, it's going to get smudged. It's going to look like this pretty quickly. And there's no point carrying around a microfiber cloth. You'll be cleaning it constantly. It's absolutely pointless. My M2 MacBook Air already looks used, loved, and ready for action. And for that reason, I'm not going to mention the smudges ever again. You have my word. Something else I've long put out to pasture is any concern over the 256GB base model. That's the exact one that I have, as I mentioned earlier, and it is absolutely spot on. The drama created around the SSD gate thing with this and the relentless benchmarking of what is basically a consumer laptop is so tiresome. So just like the smudges, I will not mention any of that stuff again when it comes to the M2 MacBook Air, because I'm just so bored of it, I'm sure you are. But there are some smaller things that don't matter about this laptop as well. The notch, for instance. So at the top of the screen, there is this thing here. This is known lovingly or not so lovingly as the notch. It is a complete non-event. Just like the MacBook Pros that have this notch as well, you don't know it's there. When you're just using this laptop, it just disappears. Don't believe anyone who tells you that this is an eyesore or that Apple should be ashamed of their design direction for this camera housing. It's utter rubbish. And if you spend that long staring at a notch, you're probably not busy enough. And the other small thing that I don't think matters with the M2 MacBook Air is the port situation, because although we still only have 2 USB-C ports, we do have MagSafe, which we didn't have on the M1 version. And that means if you're charging this laptop, you still have access to those 2 ports. And yes, they still only drive one external display, but if you need more than that, there's a MacBook Pro for that. So if I wasn't running this channel, if I wasn't a tech reviewer who reviews pretty much every Apple device that hits the market, would I still buy the M2 MacBook Air? The answer is no. I just don't need this laptop. The M1 MacBook Air was performing fantastically as the main workhorse behind the scenes at this business, and I reckon it would have continued doing that for many years to come. So for that reason, if I wasn't me, if I wasn't running Mark Ellis Reviews, I would not buy the M2 MacBook Air, particularly at the moment when the cost of living is so high, and this is such an expensive laptop. The MacBook Air will always be the machine for normal users who have great taste in tech. And sure, you can use this M2 version to edit videos, write code, and produce music. But people who do that with their MacBook Air are normally hobbyists. They're not normally people who are working against the clock or for clients. Any performance dips or deficiencies don't matter for that reason, and they're certainly not noticeable even on this base model. This M2 MacBook Air feels identical to my M1 MacBook Air, and I can't offer any higher praise than that. It's just a shame that it has arrived at a time and a price point when so many people are watching what they spend. If you want a fantastic MacBook Air but you're concerned about the financial outlook at the moment, which I completely understand, just get yourself the M1 version. You will not regret it. However, if you want to hear more of my thoughts on the M2 version of the MacBook Air, keep watching for a link to my full review.